Why did you get fired? A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager comes in and asks who I am. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. Manger says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all and they fired me. Sad face. This isn't why I got fired, but this is why I didn't get a job. I was 16 and looking to work at a Dairy Queen as my first job. My mom drove me to the interview and I was super nervous. She looked me in the eye and said, "Just be honest and be yourself and you'll do fine." I walked into that interview and when he asked me, "How long do you think you'll work here?" I responded, "Until something better comes along." For doing my job too quickly and sitting down the rest of the time. Gas station cashier, third shift. Me, why should I stand when I'm the only person in the store? Manager, it's more professional to stand than sit. Me, then why do you sit in your office? I got fired once for putting in my 2-week notice. The only other time I've gotten fired was working for a trade company during the first week. I was a supervisor, and there was a second supervisor on site. I got a call that my wife had been rushed to the hospital, which was literally less than a mile away. I asked the other supervisor if I could go to attend to her, and he said, "Sure, no problem, I've got things here. Go." I returned to the job site later to find the boss there, and he let me go on the spot for leaving the team without a supervisor. He knew what had happened, and still fired me. I won't lie, that one kind of pissed me off. I went to the emergency room instead of work. Came back with an ER note and they said, "We won't be needing that. Can you come with us?" I was 18 and it was my first full-time job. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up, a lady I had never seen before gave me a check, and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said "You're fired" or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. My parole officer wanted to make sure I actually had a job, so he went to my employer listed on my file to surprise visit me on the job. I did home wiring, so I worked at different job sites and rarely in the office. He called me to say he was going to charge me with a violation for lying to him about my whereabouts. This could have landed me back in prison for my remaining 10.5 years sentence. The owner of the company had to speak with him and vouch for me. My parole office didn't charge me, but the owner sure did fire me that day. Finding a job with a felony isn't an easy thing, and it wasn't long before my PO threatened to charge me with a violation if I didn't find a job soon. Person facepalming, light skin tone. I refused to come in 15 to 20 minutes early, unpaid for my shift. I was always 5 to 10 minutes early, but they decided they wanted me there earlier. I carried on as normal as I'm not coming in if I'm not being paid. Turned up for a 12 p.m. shift at 11:49, no one would look at me when I arrived, then was thrown in a meeting and fired for being late. Was out the door before it even hit 12. It was the only time I've ever been fired. For reporting elder abuse. His wife thought he was having an affair with the office manager. He asked me if I thought it was possible that he was having an affair with the office manager. I said, "It's possible, but I don't think you are." I could see why your wife might think so too. I was 21 and naive as hell. Never should have said anything. I built a snow scorpion sculpture. I used ketchup for the red glowing eyes and everything, on a particularly miserable day at a ski resort. The guests enjoyed my sculpture very much, management weren't so happy. They sent me home because I sneezed and I was forced to get tested for COVID. Then when I tested negative, I was terminated for abusing pandemic policies to stay home. I got fired for submitting my timesheets on Monday at 8 a.m. when I got into work. By policy, they were to be in by noon on Saturday, but my Fridays ended in the field, so I just did them on Monday mornings. My bosses didn't even look at them until noon on Tuesday, so it had zero impact on them. I drove home from being fired feeling relieved, because of how unhappy I was at that job. Worked in a DIY store. 10 minutes before my shift ended, I moved a pallet cage of paint cans, slowly, to the warehouse, and when I got in there one of the sides came off along with half of the paint cans which spilt all over. Anyway, there was about 2 minutes of my shift left, so I moved the pallet over the paint, covering it a bit, and went home. It was all caught on CCTV. Stealing narcotics. I was a nurse. 6 years clean now. Lost my nursing license though. It was a difficult lesson to learn, but it may have saved my life. Because my job was eliminated. This was code for getting rid of you and hiring someone to replace you at half the salary. Their scheme was less than a stellar success, because the person they hired was an idiot and could not do it. The customers got severely pissed. They gave me $5,000 severance if I promised not to sue them. I took their money and still sued them for age discrimination, and won. They lowered my pay, so I started sleeping at work and do only half the task they wanted me to do. Took them 3 years to fire me. Because my job is moving to Lisbon and I am not. It was 1973. Working at Mickey D's redneck manager says go get a haircut, then you can come back. I didn't go back. Ponytails rule. Told my boss I was doing too much work for not enough pay, that's why nobody stays. Was on the edge of a serious burnout and had a sick leave for 2 weeks. The day I returned, I got fired. This all after I had pretty much given my all for 5 years working 10 to 14 hours every single day, working from home and not having a private life at all. That's how I learned that you should never give too much at a job. It's just a job and they won't thank you for anything at the end of the day. I gave my boss the middle finger. Reading during my lunch break, face with rolling eyes. I was fired from Panera as soon as I walked in the door for my first day of work. I showed up 10 minutes early and walked in 5 minutes before my shift started. The manager met me at the door and said I was being unprofessional and threatened to call the cops when I pushed for an explanation. Turns out the employees did lots of drugs while working and were probably high out of their minds. I was jobless for 3 years. Did lots of online work during that time. Finally got a job. Forgot I got a job. Got a letter from my employer informing me that I got fired after a week. We formed a union and then the pandemic hit and they laid off all the unionized workers. My only time getting fired, I was 13 to 14, working at a go-kart track. I had been there about a month when I was left alone for a solid week to take care of the track as the other 2 track attendants sat around smoking, drinking, and chatting with the boss. I ran it flawlessly and had no issues. My first day off after working like 12 days straight, I got called in. I showed up within 5 minutes and they fired me saying that all I did was sit around and make the other guys run the track. They literally accused me of doing what the other guys were doing. I slammed that place so hard to everyone I knew and they went out of business within the next 2 years.